Welcome to Parenting is Prevention with Milton Creagh, father, former host of the TV series Parenting Works, and author of the book Nobody Wants Your Child. Parenting is Prevention is sponsored by the Elks National Drug Awareness Program, the Elks National Foundation, and Pride Youth Programs. Let's join Milton now for Stages of Usage.
Oh, thank you so much. We got so much to do. Are you starting to see how there's so many things that as parents that we're teaching our kids, that we have responsibility to make sure we're teaching them the right things, and we consciously try to teach the right things, but subconsciously we may teach them things that we may not necessarily want them to get. The good news is subconsciously you also teach them some good things as well. And so we just got to kind of make sure we try to eliminate the negative and increase on the positive things. Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier was I gave an example of a dad who maybe has drinks over dinner and then driving the whole family home. And I think one of the things that we have a problem with kids is that kids don't think there's certain things that can really hurt them. They don't think it's really dangerous. And I want to talk to you about maybe why that is. You see, I do a lot of drug prevention work around America. And one of the things I've noticed is that sometimes there are things that people tell parents that are things that are supposed to help you be able to recognize if your child may be developing a drug or alcohol problem, okay? And maybe you've heard these. And if you've heard these, kind of give me a signal, let me know you've heard it. You ever heard this before? Mom and Dad, if your child starts to use drugs, your child's grades will drop. Okay, I think we all heard that one, right? Here's another one. This is a good one. Mom and Dad, if your child starts using drugs, your child's circle of friends will change. Okay, so I take it you all heard that one. This is my favorite. Mom and Dad, if your child starts using drugs, your child will lose interest in sports, music, and extracurricular activities. Anybody here heard that one before? You see, the whole concept was that drugs and alcohol take up so much time that if the kid starts using drugs, they won't have time to do the other stuff. Now, can I tell you my response to those comments that we tell people? Okay, listen carefully. Here's my response to it. Lie, lie, lie. Every kid who uses drugs, their grades will not go down. In fact, I'm going to suggest to you that the majority of kids who use drugs, their grades don't go down. Their grades do not go down. I'm going to suggest to you the majority of kids who use drugs, their circle of friends does not change. And the majority of kids who use drugs who play ball do not stop playing ball, do not drop out of the band. I mean, let's think this through. The first one, their grades will go down. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody here know what the predominant drug usage profession is in America? Nope. The predominant drug usage profession in America? Nope. Somebody said sports over there? Nope. Somebody said teachers over here? Nope. Here it is, the medical profession. Doctors and nurses. It is the highest drug usage profession in America. Now, let's think this through. You know, there are treatment facilities in America that only treat medical doctors. So let me ask you a question. Medical doctors. Most of you know doctors. Kids who end up going to med school, what kind of grades do they usually get in high school? What kind of grades do they usually get in college? So if we're going to say that if you use drugs, your grades will go down, my question is, how'd they get into med school? How'd they get into nursing school? If you use drugs, your grades go down. All right? Folks, it's not true. It absolutely is not true. Here's another one. If your kid's using drugs, their circle of friends will change. Mom and Dad, let's think that through. How many of you in this room, and just show your hand, just raise your hands, how many of you can recall when you were in high school having a friend of yours who either drank a lot or smoked weed or dropped acid? Anybody? Okay. And how many of you, now for the sake of those who didn't see that, that's about 80% of you who raised your hand. How many of you, the instant you found out that your friend was drinking or smoking weed or dropping acid, how many of you, the instant you found out, said, that's it, I can't be their friend again, I'm not talking to them anymore? Did any of you say that? You didn't. You may not have done it with them, but you didn't just say, they're not my friend anymore. And so if you didn't do that, what makes you think your kids will? And here's the final one. This one's really amazing. If your kid is using drugs, your kid will probably lose interest in sports, music, and extracurricular activities. All right, now let's think this through. They'll lose interest in music. You know, my only response to that is this. It's simply this. Let's think this through, folks. Jerry Garcia. He liked music, didn't he? Okay? He had a drug problem. Why didn't he lose interest in music? Okay? But if we tell you that if your kid's using drugs, you're going to lose interest in music, how come Jerry Garcia didn't lose interest in music? You get what I'm saying? Lawrence Taylor, one of the best linebackers in the history of the National Football League, had a major drug problem. But did he lose interest in sports? No. So if these pro athletes haven't lost interest in their sports, what makes you think that your kid is going to lose interest in basketball or football or soccer or track because they started drinking? It is absolutely ridiculous. But what we've done is we've told parents that. Some well-intentioned organizations have told parents that, and it's caused a lot of parents to be able to look at their kid and say, thank God, I don't have to worry, my child is fine. And ladies and gentlemen, your child may not be fine. There are some other things. And so parents will say, well, Milt, if that's the case, what should we be looking at? Well, the first thing we have to understand is that there are stages of drug usage, okay? We have basically 4 stages of drug usage. Stage number one, I want to make sure you all get this, so we're going to do something called call response. And that means I'm going to say it, you're going to repeat it. Then I'm going to say it again, you're going to repeat it again, make sure you got it, okay? All right, first stage of drug usage is experimental. Experimental. No, you didn't sound like you meant it. Experimental. Experimental. Now, what does experimental mean? It means you're trying it for the first time. It means you just want to check it out, want to see what it's about. In fact, here's the problem. You know what the problem is? The big problem with experimental usage is kids think they have a right to experiment. And kids think there's nothing wrong with it. Anybody here ever heard kids say before, well, have you tried it? Because if you haven't tried it, how can you say it's bad? You heard people say that before? When a person says that, what they're saying to you is, I have a right to experiment with it before I make a decision. And so kids end up thinking experimentation is fine, is that it won't bother anybody, that you can just try it. And you can never become an addict without starting off as an experimental user. Experimental is where you start. For example, have any of you ever gone through this yourself or ever seen anyone do this? Maybe they're around 11 or 12 years old. They get a hold of a cigarette and they get that cigarette and they make sure nobody's watching, mom or dad aren't watching, and the kid may get the cigarette and they put it in their mouth. Does anybody here smoke, by the way? You do? Do you have a cigarette on you? Yeah. Can I borrow one? Put the camera on him. He is a smoker. Oh, and you got those real killers. You got Camel. They used to come with no filter. All right. And have you ever seen this with a kid? Kid gets a cigarette, and they're like, get a cigarette. And then they decide to just not take it in their lungs, just put them out. Then they try lungs again. That's nasty. I don't know why anybody want to do that. That's nasty. Anyone ever seen a kid go through that? When you were a kid, you ever seen anybody go through that process? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the experimental stage of cigarette smoking. That is the experimental stage. No one can become addicted to smoking unless they start right there. Now, here's the important thing, though. The problem is that kids think they have a right to experiment. How come? Because of the fact we never talk about experimental use as being bad. You know what we talk about? We talk about being a junkie being bad. We talk about being addicted being bad. We talk about being an alcoholic being bad. And almost everything we talk to kids about, we talk about the extreme, and we don't act like the initial phase, the experimental stage, we act like that's not bad. It's not dangerous. And the thing